Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was released in 1981 and directed by Steven Spielberg. It stars Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, Paul Freeman, and John Rhys-Davies. This starts the epic journey of the character that is Indiana Jones. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 42-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. I think about my first watch, and I'm fairly confident this was a USA film for me. As odd as that sounds, I feel like I definitely watched it on TV, which means I probably missed some of the goriness that we partook in as we watched this today. What was your first watch like on this one?
I think mine was the same. I think I might have watched it on TV first, which I'm like, now I'm starting to wonder if some of the symbols in this movie were in that version or not. It kind of feels like it shouldn't be, but I do remember it. So I'm like, man, the standards were way different back then.
Bobby, your first watch?
Yeah, for sure. Same on TV. And I know for sure that one thing they cut out was the whole like well of dead people outside of the snake pit thing. So I remember thinking like, oh wow, like the snake pit was just right next to being right outside. And then when I actually watched the movie again, the uncut version, I was like, oh wait, now it makes sense that the snake pit it's like next to some like graveyard kind of situation than the outside wall.
Yeah, I can imagine, looking at it. I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like there's an element of Indiana Jones, and since we're tying it to at 42 years, the movies as they come out, sort of it is a family film. But I'm pausing. You notice the way I'm saying that because the content is actually not so much that, but for some reason, Indy seems like a jovial, good thing. And I think if there's a reason, there's a ride for it at Disneyland, right? I mean, minus the property rights and Disney acquiring things. Forget that. It's a very fun ride. So I think the next thing I'll ask you is did you ever have that moment where you said like, I want to be an Indiana Jones type character growing up?
For sure.
I don't.
It was fun.
Like, but you can see yourself as like, it's actually a really interesting question because it's like, you know how sometimes movies come out and they spark a wave of interest in something in particular. So it's like, did this spark a wave of like, archaeologist or whatever as a result? Like
I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle, so I don't. But no, you're right. It'd be interesting to see if someone was just going, you know what, I really want to be an archaeologist, hoping they could plunder the spoils from long lost civilizations.
Wanted to work for the British Museum.
There it is. Not in my museum. There it is. But Bobby, you said you said you felt that way. Like there's an element because I think his character is so. It's something that seems worth being because he's doing these bombastic things while also kind of seeming normal, even though he's not.
Yeah, there was like just like a confidence and an aura to him that I was attracted to, like he's like a professor and he seems to be like very in demand in his career and like very sought after. And then he goes off and does all these other like crazy adventures as his like side gig kind of thing, like his side hustle, like doing all this interesting traveling and all this other crazy stuff. And it sounds interesting to just kind of like almost like a Batman kind of situation where he's like this professor guy on one side.
So are you an archaeologist, Bobby? Did you follow up on that?
No, I did not follow up on it.
And that's probably the rub at the end of the day, right? I would like to know that, Matt. There probably is a statistic that probably shows, just like parents will name their kids after certain characters when there's a big movie. Maybe there's people who said, I really want this career after seeing Indiana Jones.
Man, how messed up would it be if people after this movie came out and named their kid Indiana, only to find out in the third movie that it was a dog?
No,
even actually is. I know that's actually, man, we should cut spoilers out on that one, huh?
There's a bit of spoiler there for the third film, but that's okay. We're gonna get there. We are gonna get there. Yeah, that would be sad for that kid, but maybe not. They still know they're being named after the character, but I haven't run into too many Indianas in my life. How about you?
I've met more people named after alcohol than Indiana, I think.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, that's kind of a thing. So, we're introduced to Indy. He's going in and getting this idol out of the temple. The very infamous scene of switching the bag of sand for this wonderful idol. It's odd to me because I keep thinking back to really understanding these films and then moving into when the ride came out at Disneyland and going to visit that, and just the kind of the awe of how they connected and what they built there from it, because all of the detail they put into that ride was just phenomenal, and the bits and
Mhm.
pieces that they took from clearly this movie
Right.
to bring that detail in was just it's why I think, even though at 42 years old, it still ties to, as much as I saw it on USA, having that tie-in with the ride makes me really nostalgic just for that youth piece, and being in awe of how much work was put into something that was so detailed, and the ride is actually fun.
Well, there's the boulder is like it it's gone now, but it was like a giant pop culture thing when it first came out. Like there was all these parodies of the boulder. Like there was another parody movie where there's another guy being chased by a boulder and he like breaks out the studio doors and starts running down the street and the boulder's still chasing after him. And so like all these people are being chased by boulders and all these like parodies of it.
It makes sense because I mean, that's the thing about this movie. There's so many parts of where the action happens where they had a lot of set pieces and they do a lot of bits in between those things. So there are these memorable moments that you kind of have to work with. He goes through that process. He ends up re-engaging with Marion, who runs a bar in Nepal, if I recall.
Mm-hmm. You're a
And
poet.
yeah, I know, just a little bit. And then, we're introduced to some very strange past history, is what I'm gonna say. Turns out
Mm.
they were lovers at some point, and she hates him for it because he broke her heart. And, she admits that she was a child when this happens. Oh boy. Oh boy. What's
That
going on with this
that
film?
went way over my head for many, many times watching this. I
I
did not
honestly think it went
understand any of
over
that.
everyone's head. If it wasn't for some of the commentary that we have from what Lucas and Spielberg after the fact, yeah, they just a little bit creepy there, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, not too good.
I mean, it's one of those things where like I feel like without that context, it was like you said, you don't really pay much attention to it because I think that it could reference a lot of things as far as like where she put that age or whatever, but finding out what the
Mhm,
actual age was supposed to be. I mean, it's like a lot of things when you find out the real story about Pocahontas or anything, you
mhm,
start hearing, I mean, that was real life,
Mhm.
but you start hearing the
Sure.
numbers and you're like, oh man, like, and it's not, well, it is what happened. It's Indiana Jones's reaction to her being upset about it and how he just tries to pass it off. Like in that moment, that makes it, and knowing that fact makes
mhm,
it not good. Like I said, during watching this, I wrote the note that Indiana Jones is a scumbag.
uh-huh.
And that did not change the entire time watching the movie. Like I felt that way in lots of instances,
He was like,
especially
"Oh,
related to
your
her.
dad died? Can you still give me the thing that I'm asking for? Oh, I haven't seen you in 10 plus years, and and I probably shouldn't have seen you when I was seeing you 10 years ago. Can you still give me the idol thing that I'm looking for?"
Oh no, even after like he thought she had died, like
No.
in the middle part of the movie, like he grieves, he does, and
Mhm.
then whenever he meets up with
Sala?
Sala, like they're all smiles and giggles because like
Mhm.
they're moving forward with their like that was it. All that history, all that like just all right, it's over.
That was a great part because he sees Sala and he says, "Marion's dead," and Sala goes, "I know." And then they just move on. They're just like, "Oh, no problem. We're just gonna move on." But
Like
before that happens, we do have like a very interesting it's another action set piece where they're running around, right? So we get a monkey who's introduced. We have all the shenanigans with we're learning about the Nazis and how they're kind of everything that everyone's looking for, and they're running around the town and they're getting into fights as they do this running escape scene. And one thing that just stood out to me more than anything is really all the background actors and what the people in the town were doing. It was really just odd because like you could tell they were just directed to kind of walk back and forth, and then ultimately they cheered on a lot of violence, just a lot of violence.
I well, I mean, they did film in Tunisia for a lot of those scenes, so I'm guessing they probably just got a bunch of locals to do
Mhm.
it. So like, I'm guessing there was probably language barriers going on. No one probably had any experience. That considered, they didn't do too bad. I've seen worse from actual trained background actors,
Yeah.
extras.
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, it could be worse, but that entire sequence did feel weird as a result of
Mhm.
what was going on,
Mhm.
because like either they were really used to violence going on, or like, oh, that dude was just murdered. Okay, moving on.
It was we celebrate this. I mean, okay, so we'll talk about the scene that I think Bobby you have some extra info on, but we have this gigantic man wearing all black with this great sword. What do you call those type of swords? I can't remember the name of it. Never mind. He's there to battle Indy, and then Indy just whips out his gun and shoots him dead, and everyone cheers. Bobby, you'd mentioned there's a reason for this.
Yeah, apparently the story behind the production is that there was originally a large fight scene planned that was supposed to be several minutes in between, like sword to sword and hand to hand combat kind of situation. But the story is that a lot of the crew members got sick because they were filming overseas and they got caught some kind of stomach bug. And so Harrison Ford and a whole bunch of other crew members were actually sick, and they said, "Hey, like, let's try to see if we can speed this thing up and not do this huge drawn out fight scene." He's like, "Can I just shoot him?" And they all thought that that was a good idea, so he just shoots him and they move on.
And it
But
kind of makes her a good bit, right?
yeah, I
It's
mean,
just
that's the legend, yeah.
I'll take it as a legend, but I mean, it's one of those where I think it helps to set up, again, that character that is Indy, that even as he pulls out his gun, he kind of just was in a place of like, oh, I guess I'm just gonna have to kill you.
Yeah, he as a character was over fighting at that point too.
hmm And then really we move from there, and we could talk about. I think we've mentioned this before on other episodes in terms of wanting this in more movies. How do we feel about the map and what they display as they move around the world?
Uh, I mean, and this is just the history buff in me. Like, I love the idea of it, and I know it came from other movies that came before. There's just like most of the great ideas in this movie came from previous movies that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg grew up watching.
Sure.
It was kind of hard because like a lot of the things that happened in this movie, like I'm like, that country didn't exist back in 1936. Like, there's a couple of those that happened throughout that map or whatever. It's like that.
Oh no! Don't point that out. No.
It's nitpicky stuff, just like some of the vehicles and airplanes and the RPG, like all stuff that I know didn't exist during that time, but I know was probably like, if you don't use modern names for things, sometimes people don't really know. And even looking
hmm
at the map, like I think there was an intention to make it look period accurate, because like you look at like the when they showed the west coast of the US, like the shape of how like Baja California and stuff wasn't quite right, and how it kind of
Mhm.
hmm
like it looked like probably pre-satellite maps would look like, right?
Hmm.
So I did appreciate that aspect. It's just some of the names.
You're like, you're
Right.
not there yet. What's happening here? How could you travel to this place that doesn't exist? Yet they did, Matt. Yet they did.
Well, this was kind of more like to that point, this was kind of more like they call it, the type of movie where his hat doesn't fall off, right? Like they
hmm
didn't, it was more like pulpy fun than like historical accuracy. There's like, it's like kind of bombastic, like crazy type of action, where like his six-shooter revolver fires off like 12 shots in a row, and then he dives behind this wooden table, and then some guy breaks out this giant machine gun and just wastes the entire backside of the bar, and then Indy jumps out again and then hammers the guy over the head with a bottle or whatever, it's like it's just meant for fun. And
Is he the original John Wick?
he's the original,
No.
like,
Fine.
RRR or whatever, like, from, like, those
Oh.
Indian movies, like, those crazy ones where they're, like, fighting tigers and
I don't think I was ready for that one. We didn't see any animal battles, did we?
just the monkey.
Just the poor monkey and the dates. You can't have bad dates.
Bad dates.
So, we move through this progress. We obviously say how we feel about the treatment towards Marion. We meet his arch nemesis, Belloc, Paul Freeman playing the Frenchman. We have that scene where they sit together and he tells him, "You're not that much different from me." And I think, I sat there going like, he's right. I don't even know that Indy's on the light side.
I mean, they could have established maybe that he was. I mean, obviously, he was willing to partner up with the Nazis. So that's obviously a line Indy doesn't cross during that time. But I mean, he is still rating and like, yeah, you could say, well, they're trying to find this stuff to put in museums, but they're not the museums of the countries he found them. So he's not doing that great of stuff.
Right.
This is absolutely the case. And their goal here is to find the Ark. The good old biblical Ark of Covenant. Probably saying that wrong. It's been a while. We go through these processes and they're in this place where they're at a dig, an archaeological site. And boy, Indy and Sala could really roam around that place pretty freely without getting caught. I thought the sheer lack of oversight at a dig that would be so important was a bit interesting.
Well, it's like the Star Wars thing, right? Like, they always say that the rebels could, like, infiltrate, like, the Death Star or the Star Destroyers or whatever because the Empire is so arrogant, they don't ever think that anybody would be able to do something like that. So I wonder if it's, like, the same kind of idea. Like, they're like, "Oh, no one would attack us," like, kind of thing, so they don't care or don't care to, like, have any security or any of that kinda thing.
Were you impressed when you first saw the Ark? I was.
Yeah, it looks cool.
I still have the problems with the fact that it was made out of solid gold. I'm like, that doesn't hold water. That I don't know where they got all that gold underneath. Like, it felt too overly ornate, but I did like the double falcons on the top. I really like that design element. And I think, wasn't it like on Mythbusters or something? Like later on they tried to like turn that into like a taser or something in one of the episodes. So like they hooked up batteries to it. And like if you touch both sides, like it would shock you or something.
Oh, right.
I do have a problem with the fact that Indiana Jones and Saul were able to lift that solid limestone thing by themselves off. Like, He-Man.
I think we did find he has superhuman strength because
Sometimes.
there's multiple times where he is moving these large slabs of stone. I mean, he climbed a statue that he was somehow able to break. Yeah, yes, we'll give it to him that it was old, but then rock it and then fall over into another wall, breaking it and survive,
Right.
no problems.
And then
It's only the snakes that get to him.
Push out a solid, like, what, 2-foot cubed thing of limestone, like it was nothing. Like,
that gets us into the car chase. And there's one moment that I really like, even though I think it's impossible. But how did you feel about the car chase?
I mean, it's not Fast and the Furious. I mean, well, the funny thing too is, like, in my mind, I have a hard time separating this car chase from the tank chase in the third movie. Because it looks so similar in, like, location and everything that, like, I was like, where's the tank? Oh, man, the tank's in the third movie. That's right.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Like, I was expecting him to run by with the horse and, like, jam the rock into one of the turrets, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, that's, like, wrong movie."
The one thing that I like watching it this time stood out to me, and I think I said it when we were watching, is like how Scooby-Doo some of these scenes kind of felt. Like all the back and forth inside the carriage of the truck.
Mhm.
felt cartoonish at times. I was shocked seeing the gunshot wound. Like, yeah, it was very like cartoonishly red blood that sprayed
Mhm.
everywhere, but like for a PG movie, that was kind of interesting to see. Again, headshots and stuff happen in the movie, but seeing your hero get shot in the arm like that was kind of interesting to see.
Oh, when he's getting punched in the arm?
Right.
Yeah.
I grimace each time. I'm like, "Oh, that's gotta hurt." But then, of course, he's like, "Oh, cool. I'm back to being totally okay, even though I just got shot." The part I like, even though again impossible, and I'm assuming like probably the axle of the car or something would have chewed him up, is him leaning under and then using his whip to drag out from underneath the vehicle and then be
Right.
dragged on the dirt. He clearly friction is not an issue for him at any point, and there must have been no pain, hence his superhuman nature.
That's why he wears a leather jacket.
Right.
It's oh, you just need a jacket. That's it.
Yes.
That's what protects you from that. They have the arc, and yes, here comes Matt's favorite part. There is an RPG presented to us.
It just doesn't
And he
belong in that time period. That's the only thing. Like, it's just like, I think it's like from the 50s or 60s or something.
I mean, he's threatening to blow up the thing, and I think Balak does make a convincing argument that ultimately, hey, you're here and you love archaeology, you got to see this thing be opened with us. And of course, they're going to go through a whole procession and actually open the ark. And I think I remember this more so from being a kid and being kind of terrified at the idea of what they were doing, and then all the more so the end result of what happens, and we get the really gross effects that we see with the faces melting
Mhm.
and yeah, as much as it looks really fake today, it still was something that wigged me out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I think there were different levels. I think the oh, what was his name? One with the glasses, Tot. Was that his name?
Yeah,
The
tote or something?
Tote?
Totes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the I think his held up a little bit better. I think
Mhm.
Bollocks and the other guy, I can't remember what, Dietrich.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Theirs probably looked the most fake. Though I'll be honest, those three were still better than the Alfred Molina corpse at the beginning of the movie. Like, at least they still look like them at the very beginning. That one looked nothing like Alfred Molina.
You know how hard it is to make a wax dummy thing. Come
Right.
on.
It's just, you know,
What about when Balak almost ate a fly?
I
oh
don't
yeah,
think he
that scene.
almost ate one. He looks like he did eat it.
No, that's one of those scenes that like I feel like that scene is talked about from the behind the scenes point of view as
Yeah.
the sword, where like
Mhm.
they openly admit there's like, no, the fly flew out, but we cut it in a way that it looked like it went inside his mouth and just disappeared because they thought it
Right.
looked either intimidating or whatever. But it's one of those moments where like, you know, it's like the bonking of the head in Star Wars.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
a scene that happened and somebody was like, we're gonna, but it somehow became like a legendary scene as a result.
Yeah.
And it's so
Mhm.
interesting how those kind of things happen in movies sometimes.
It's kind of taken on a life of its own a little bit.
Mhm.
So we look at, I mean, the arc gets open. We have a lot of special effects, and really throughout the film, there's effects thrown in. How do we feel that's holding up today? I know we saw a lot of matte work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it held up pretty good. I mean, we were just talking about some of the big stuff, but I I'm I guess I have an affinity for the animated, like lightning bolts and sparks and all those kinds of things, like the practical type stuff. And there's a huge amount of like miniatures and mat work, and I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff in there that was really tricky that I just totally take for granted and think, oh, like they just did something there, but there's some kind of crazy wizardry to it, pre-computer wizardry.
We do like pre-computer wizardry. Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, I think that it holds up decently. I think the thing that shows its age the most, I think, in all the scenes was the compositing,
Mhm.
Yeah.
especially with anything related to the skies, because it was like this scene, the scene when they're initially trying to get into the Well of Souls, where like the storm happens or whatever all of a sudden. Um, I think that's where you kind of see a lot of the weaknesses. But the one thing I did like was the scene with the cobra or the asp or whatever inside the the Well of Souls. But
Mhm.
like there's no way it was compositing. So my guess is it was just like a
Right.
plexiglass screen or something put between them.
Yeah, I'm
To
pretty
to
sure that's how they did it. Yeah.
I'm sure if you look really close, there's probably like sheen or something like that of like the screen. But I don't know. It was effective. I think the best part of the scene I think was when the generator was getting taken out
Mm,
like that. I think that
mhm.
was like that, and like the beginning of it, I feel like was probably the most intimidating. I think the one where like they had the ghost come out initially, and then it turns into like a scary skull face.
Yes,
Yeah.
skeleton.
I was
Yeah.
like, not so much there, but like I'm sure Matt at like 6 was probably terrified.
Right.
Yes, that's the catch. Yep. But you were still 6 watching a pretty violent movie. But it was USA. So again, we don't know everything that was cut out. We know this spawned multiple other films, but Bobby, you were introducing me to some new knowledge. Apparently, there's some canonical things that have to do with a TV show about a young Indiana Jones.
Yeah, so there was a TV show back in the 90s called the Indiana Jones Chronicles that kind of like spans Indy's younger life, but then there's some flash forward stuff too of and Harrison Ford actually makes like a brief appearance in the show where he's like older than the films where he's like there's one scene where he's like in his 90s and he's wearing an eye patch. So it kind of like hints that he's had even more adventures after everything. And then he pops up a little bit, like, at one point, he pops up with, like, a beard, I think, but, like, a grayed beard. But, yeah,
So I think it'll
it's
be interesting as we go through these films and then understanding that in this year 2023, they're making another one.
yeah, that's pretty crazy to be, like, what did you say, 42 years or something? 42 years?
42 years between the first film and the next one that's coming out. That
That's
is
gotta be
definitely
some
wild.
kind of, like, close to some kinda record to have, like, a person reprise a role after 42 years.
But there's an element here. Are you excited about that, or would you have preferred to see someone else finally play Indy?
I mean, me personally, like I'm such a fan of Last Crusade that I feel like that was like such a good ending to it that them continuing even to Crystal Skull. There's I don't like seeing old Indiana Jones. I'll be honest. Like I didn't like seeing old Han Solo. I don't really like seeing old Indiana Jones. Like supposedly in the new one, they're gonna have less like ouch my back and my aching arthritis type jokes in it or whatever. And I hope so because that really took me out of the fourth movie. So I'm me personally, like I don't have a problem with the idea of them recasting, pulling in James Bond so that
Mhm.
we could have Indiana Jones still in the Nazi era, doing a bunch of stuff. And I feel like to me, that's the reason why the fourth movie didn't hold up as well, is because I feel like we kind of lost that. I don't want to call it the romanticism of like the 30s and 40s because obviously it was a very terrible time for lots of people. But I feel like, it's like, The Rocketeer, and there's so many other movies that I feel like during that time, vehicles and travel and, there,
Yeah.
there was this exploration of the unknown that was going on that's kind of lost during the space age that you got
Mhm.
in the fourth movie. So I just don't know if they really have the same sort of, um, you know, atmosphere and environment that you would have during that time period.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like I wish they do that, but I think in the new one, it's supposed to be like immortal zombies or something like that is supposed to be in it. So like, I
That
guess
would be
there's,
great.
Mm.
but it's still, you have to deal with, jokes about like, oh, I don't know how to operate a VCR, or, whatever during that time period, it'd be in like the 60s or whenever it's going to be.
So, I mean, is there okay, clearly they had the TV show to get us into the idea of a younger Indiana Jones. If this for the first movie, he's supposed to be what, 37 or something like that? So, why can't we get some really good stuff with a younger actor to represent Indy in his 20s and kind of the stuff that leads him up to this point?
I think you probably have some hardcore Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford fans preparing their pitchforks right now just for
Oh no. Oh
suggesting it.
no. Oh no. Like, I apologize, but no, really, I don't. Isn't that what we wanted? Like I think Matt, you mentioned this name, Chris Pratt.
Oh, he said that out loud. That was supposed that was supposed to be between friends. Oh my god.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Thrown under the bus. Oh man.
I saw
apologize.
Photoshop stuff that was put together, and I thought he didn't look bad as the idea, and I could
Mhm.
see a version. I didn't mind his character from the first, Jurassic World movie. So I
I
could
was gonna say it feels like that character fits that vibe a little
like I
bit.
I could see the transition. And
Mhm,
they could cast it, anyone else. Maybe there's somebody else they could have cast that'd be good too. Like
mhm.
I don't want to see 21-year-old Indiana Jones, but I also don't want to see 72-year-old Indiana Jones. Like I like him in his 30s and 40s. Like I want to see those adventures where, you get to see a spry Indiana doing things.
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, that gets into, I mean, I hate to say this, and we mentioned this as kind of things move forward with movies. Where does where do you think AI is gonna play into this? Do we keep Harrison forever and ever and ever and ever because the computers can replicate image and voice?
Oh, ah, he doesn't look bad in the trailer for the new movie. I'm not gonna lie. So if he's okay with it and they do a good job, I might be okay with it.
No.
I don't think I'm there yet. Not for this
Matt
one.
submits to the AI overlords. You heard it here first.
I don't think I'm there yet for this particular one.
But at some point, you think you could accept it as well.
Well, I was okay with the Rogue One stuff. They got the permission of the states.
I just think it's going to be a very interesting feature as actors give over their likeness, probably in this form, to probably guarantee their states additional income well into the future. And now we start getting into copywriting people and their likenesses, and there are no more new IPs. All right. On that note, Poppy, are you recommending this movie?
For the music alone, watch it if you haven't already. What are you doing with your life? Come on. You're making me angry. Watch the movie. Come on.
Matt, Matt, do you recommend Raiders of the Lost Ark?
This is kind this is a tough one for me because I think people who have seen it, I think it's always nice to watch it again. Um, I don't think that, you know, people who are younger than 20 are going to enjoy this movie as much as we did in our
Mm,
20s, to be honest. I
Mhm.
think that honestly, like, and I know again, pitchforks, fire, torches, all that or whatever. I think that, something like National Treasure would catch people in that generation's attention better than this movie would.
oh no. Oh no. I almost have to do this. Bobby, National Treasure or Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I didn't Raiders. I'm
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
I'm not involved in this. Take my name off of this.
I'm glad at least you're standing by your pick. Matt, I love that or option there, and I might also lean National
What
Treasure.
the
I am not gonna
mother?
lie. But yes, I
Let me
think
hold
we
on a
should
minute. Let me get my pitchfork. I'll be right back.
Everyone should still watch
I
this
need to light
movie.
my torch.
It's obviously the beginning of the Indiana Jones journey. It's definitely worth watching, but maybe also learning about the things that went into it, so you have some context. Um, it's just hit play, as Bobby said. But if you also watch National Treasure right behind it, you might be pleasantly surprised at how good National Treasure is.
Boo.
As always, thank you for listening. And remember, don't look at it. Shut your eyes. Don't look at it no matter what happens.